I went to North Carolina, it was like I graduated from high school one day, and I was on a bus to North Carolina the next day, headed for school. And as we went through the South, there was a dramatic change. You know, I got off the bus, and I saw signs that said whites only, colored only, colored fountains. These were things I had only heard about.
I was very much isolated until my senior year. And there was one other white student who lived in Columbia who decided to befriend me. And we would study together and just kind of relate together in classes. So when I left nursing classes and went to the Delta activities, or with my Delta sisters, that's when I felt most comfortable.
But at that time, the big word was relevance. We wanted everything to be relevant. And so the big, I guess the like you said on Shaw's campus, students, a lot of the activities were centered on the campus, on the professors, on the coursework, trying to make it relevant to being Black in the 60s.
I guess my experience is different from either of my sorors here, because I grew up in the segregated South, and all I knew was the segregated South. So it wasn't a shock. It would have been a shock to me if I didn't see a whites only sign, because that's all I knew. And I was also in the rural South, which is very different from the little city there. We were not Negroes, we were colored. Even when I went to jail and I was looking at schools, one of the things that I've always been interested in is activism. You know, I grew up in the Emmett Till era, and I remember when he was murdered. I grew up before Brown. Before Brown, but even the Brown decision in '54 meant nothing to the colored schools the white schools in Mississippi, because my school integrated in 1970 as opposed to 1954. The other thing that was taking place in the rural South is that we had the Freedom Rights movement. The Freedom Riders came in the 60s, like 63, 64, and showed us how unequal we were and how mistreated we as a race were. And so I grew up getting very involved emotionally in what was taking place.
I think my most memorable experience was as I went on through the nursing program, looking at all of my classmates and realizing I was the only African American student in that nursing program. And when I go back now and look at the pictures on the wall of the graduating classes, every other year there is at least one African American student in the nursing class. That has been kind of disheartening for me, because as many young women as I talk to over the years who want to go to nursing school and talk about wanting to go to Missouri, I tell them, I want you to go visit. I want you to look at the pictures on the wall. I want you to get a feel for what you think you might be going through.
We did have a somewhat campus shutdown after Martin Luther King got shot and killed. I worked at the phone company as a long distance operator, and I remember the board lighting up. This was the old factory where you literally had to take a cord. And I remember one night the board lit up, and all of a sudden you hear people saying, I want to make a collect call here, and crying in the background. It's like, you know, what's going on? And one of the supervisors happened to walk down, and all of a sudden you started hearing this whisper like, Martin Luther King's been killed, Martin Luther King's been killed.
The climate was the same kind of activism that you all had. But I mean, we had Charles Evans was always starting protests. I mean, that was just kind of what we did. And Jackson State and Tougaloo were always willing to jump in. And so, you know, we were there when students were carted off to jail, put in paddy wagons, taken to the jail, never really arrested. But involved in those issues. And we also had the National Guard on campus a couple of times. First was the protest when we King was killed. There was a big National Guard presence. They came in, they did the tear gas, they did, and would disperse the crowd. The next year, the National Guard came in. At that time, the protest was behind the Vietnamese War, and they actually killed two students. One was a student not far from my hometown who was trying to get into the dormitory and was killed by National Guards. And the other student was a high school student who was walking across the campus trying to get home. He had been working that night. And
Deltas were very outspoken. We had elected the first female campus vice president. So as a chapter, we didn't really respond, but individuals, when you looked around at who was in the crowd, it was Deltas. And we went down, and the National Guard literally had us cordoned off at the end of the campus. And one pointed a rifle, and I do believe it was a bayonet in that rifle. They said, we can't go. So the staff who were off campus couldn't get on campus. And they did have some campus housing for staff.